Hello there, AP Environmental Science class. Welcome back to part 3 of my lecture on Chapter 10, Sustaining Terrestrial Biodiversity, Forest Public Lands, Grasslands, Wetlands, and Cities. So part 1 and part 2 of this lecture dealt with the forest, the public lands, the grasslands, and the wetlands. And now here, part 3, our final part of Chapter 10's lecture, will focus on cities and talk about how we can create cities that are more ecologically sustainable and livable. So, how can cities become more sustainable and livable? Well, most cities are unsustainable because of high levels of resource use, waste, pollution, and poverty. So, in a couple of slides, we're going to really start talking about something called an eco-city. And in an eco-city, this allows people to choose between walking, biking, or mass transit for most of their transportation needs instead of using cars. In an city, most of the waste are recycled or reused. They grow much of their own food in these eco cities, and they protect biodiversity by preserving surrounding land. So again, we'll talk more about this as we go through the next couple of slides. So 3 important urban trends. There are these. A proportion of global population living in urban areas is increasing. Number and size of urban areas is mushrooming. We have these mega cities and hyper cities that are forming out there. We'll talk about it in just a second. We're kind of in a mega city in a way, because it's pretty much urbanized from here in New York City area all the way down the New Jersey Turnpike into Philadelphia, and then down into the Washington, D.C. area. So again, we have a lot of these urban areas that are mushrooming, and again, we are kind of in the middle of one of those. Poverty is also becoming increasingly urbanized, mostly in less developed countries. So here are just some of those mega cities or major urban areas with 10 million people or more. This was from 2015, so a little while ago. You'll notice there's New York, again, 20.5 million people in the mega city. Again, Los Angeles, Mexico City. You'll notice many in Asia, China, Japan, and obviously some bigger cities in Europe as well. So again, these are just some of these mega cities that are out there here on the earth. So between 1800 and 2016, the percentage of U.S. population living in urban areas increased from 5% to 82%. Why did this happen? Well, mainly because of jobs, right? There were ways to make money in the cities. 3 phases between 1800 and 2008. First phase was migration from rural areas to large central cities. Then you had people migrating from the large central cities to suburbs or smaller cities kind of outside of the mega city. So first in the 1800s, everyone kind of rushed into the cities, and then they kind of spread out a little bit. They went from these large central cities into the suburbs, and now we're seeing a migration from the north and east to the south and west. You may be hearing a bunch about that on the news as people are leaving these highly urbanized areas and moving to areas where there is less urbanization. But of course, the more people move into those areas that have less urbanization, it's going to produce more urbanization. So again, the cycle will unfortunately continue. So again, here are major urban areas in the United States with more than 1 million people. And again, what am I talking about, right? This was the from right here in New York all the way down to Philly, D.C., and actually going up into Boston as well. Again, these are just mega cities, major urban areas. And you'll notice Florida is beginning to see some of those major urban areas, even Texas, as people are migrating to the south and to the west. You'll notice most of the California coast from San Diego up to San Francisco is one of these major urban areas as well. All right, so obviously this is a problem for the environment. And again, we're going to talk more about how to produce more sustainable cities. So urbanization obviously has its advantages and disadvantages. What are the advantages? Well, they're the centers of economic development, innovation, education, technical advances, and jobs. Recycling economically is actually rather feasible in a city because everyone is kind of living rather close to one another. So you actually can recycle things. Really doesn't cost a lot of money to do so. Preservation of biodiversity density outside of urban areas. So again, an advantage of putting everyone in a small urban area is that the outside doesn't have many people, and so that can actually preserve biodiversity. And obviously, mass transportation, right? Mass transit is a major advantage of living in an urban area. Disadvantages: huge ecological footprint, right? These urban areas I just showed you consume 75% of the world's resources. Lack of vegetation in these urban areas, water problems. You deprive wild and rural areas of water because you're sucking them, or obviously moving them into the cities to provide water for the cities. And also, cities can have flooding problems as you have a lot of concrete that doesn't allow water to infiltrate the ground. That water runs off. And obviously, concentration of pollution and health problems with all these people living closely together. You get air and water pollution along with solid and hazardous waste. So those are just some of the disadvantages of living in an urban area. Some more disadvantages: the urban heat island effect. This causes cities to be hotter than the surrounding area, right? New York City, always a couple of degrees hotter than we are here in Ardsley, and that's because of all the cars down there, the trucks, the concrete, right? All that stuff holds in heat or releases heat, making New York City usually a couple of degrees warmer than the surrounding areas. But that obviously then leads to higher energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions as you're running your air conditioners maybe a little more down in the city than you are up here in the suburbs. In addition, altered climate and light pollution. Cities tend to be warmer, like I just talked about, rainy, foggier, and cloudier than rural areas. And artificial light has also affected some species, as again, down in New York City, right? The city that never sleeps. Well, that's an issue when you have artificial light on all the time. A lot of creatures like us, human beings, have a hard time with that, right? We need some darkness. So that is another problem of urbanization. Also, cities depend on non-urban areas for matter and energy resources, and then they generate large amounts of pollution, waste matter, and heat. So that's another issue. All these inputs are coming into the city: a lot of energy, a lot of food, water, raw materials, manufactured good, money, and information. All that is flowing in from the rural areas, right, or at least the non-urban areas outside of the city, and then the city with all those inputs producing a lot of solid waste, a lot of waste heat, air pollutant, water pollutants, greenhouse gases, right, noise. You do get some good things that come out, like ideas and wealth and maybe some manufactured goods for sale. But again, the issue is a lot of inputs coming in, and then unfortunately a lot of negative outputs from these urbanized areas, from these mega cities. So cities can grow upward or outward. Now, around here, they're tend to growing outward, right into the suburbs, right? Westchester County, right? Nassau County on Long Island, Bergen County in New Jersey, right? These are almost urban areas now. They're not necessarily suburban. They're kind of going from suburban to urban. So in over in China and Japan, they have compact cities that are small. Everyone lives in the city and they grow up instead of out. Hong Kong, Tokyo are examples of this, with a lot of mass transit. In the US and Canada, most of the cities are dispersed, meaning they're not building up in a compact area. They're allowed to spread out because of all the land that we have here in the US. But that then leads to what are known as car-centered cities. And this is when people then need to drive their cars into the cities because there's not many good forms of mass transit, and then obviously that leads to furthering the pollution, furthering the greenhouse gas emissions, et cetera, et cetera. So urban sprawl is the word when cities, instead of growing upward, grow outward. This is an example: Las Vegas. You'll notice on the left, 1973. You're not seeing much, just maybe some homes, some irrigated areas where they're growing grass. Now look at Vegas, and again, this was a while ago, 2013, right? Look at all that sprawl. This city didn't grow up, right? This city didn't stay compact and grow up. It grew outward. And I would argue that's kind of what's happening here in the New York City area, right? Obviously, Manhattan, you grow upwards a little bit, but many of our mega city here in New York, again, urban sprawl has grown outward, and that's why New Jersey, here in Westchester, Rockland County, over in Western Long Island, Nassau County, etc., seeing more urbanization, as again, New York City not necessarily growing up, but growing out, kind of like here in Las Vegas. And again, this is called urban sprawl. So what is the natural capital degradation related to urban sprawl? Again, here's one of our favorite charts that you need to know for potential FRQ answers, right? So land and biodiversity, we're losing cropland, we're fragmenting forests, grasslands, wetlands, and wildlife habitat when we produce this urban sprawl. Water, we are increasing the use and pollution of surface water and groundwater and increasing runoff and flooding. Again, you put in concrete. Concrete does not soak up water, right? It allows the water to run off, and that can cause flooding. Energy, air, and climate, we're increasing energy use and waste, which is increasing emissions of carbon dioxide and other air pollutants. And the economic effect of urban sprawl, declining of the downtown business district because people are now moving out. And unfortunately, you then get more unemployment in the central cities as, again, people moving outward, taking jobs, taking things like that with them. So these are just some of the issues that come along with urban sprawl. So one of the things we're going to talk about of these eco-cities is one of the key factors of an eco-city is not having lots of cars being used, individual cars by individuals like you and I driving around, right? In eco-cities, they're going to talk about bicycling, they're going to talk about mass transit and things like that. So there are alternatives to cars. We're going to talk about them, trade-offs, right? So what are bicycling? What are the advantages? Well, they're quiet, non-polluting. They take few resources to manufacture. They burn no fossil fuel. They require little parking space. And I would also add another advantage. It's good for your health, right? Biking obviously is a great exercise, so it's good for your health as well. Disadvantages, little protection in an accident. When you bike, there's no protection from bad weather, so obviously tough to bike around here in the wintertime, for instance. Impractical for long trips, right? Can't really go 500 miles on a bike. I guess you could. I couldn't. Maybe some people can, but again, it's not that practical. Bike lanes and secure bike storage not yet widespread in our cities. Buses, okay, again, so we're talking about mass transit. These are alternatives to cars, which can help again, create more of a city with less pollution, things like that. So buses, advantages, reduce car use and air pollution, because even though around here we have some green buses, even if the buses are still using fossil fuels, obviously one bus will produce less fossil fuels than, let's say, the 35 people who fit on a bus. If you're driving 35 individual cars, right, much more in the way of fossil fuels being or pollution being used, fossil fuels being used and pollution being put up into the atmosphere. Buses can be rerouted if needed, and they're cheaper than heavy rail systems. Disadvantages, can lose money because they require affordable fares, can get caught in traffic that can potentially add to the noise and air pollution, and riders need to be committed to a transportation schedule, which may not work for everyone. All right, what about rapid rail? Well, advantages, much more energy efficient per rider than cars, planes are, produce less pollution than cars and planes, can reduce the need for air travel, car, roads, and parking areas. So again, we don't have to pave and throw as much concrete out there. Disadvantages of rapid rail, costly to run, maintain, cause noise and vibration if you live near the tracks, and obviously can add some risk to collision at car crossing. What about mass transit rail? So rapid rail is more like your Amtrak, all right, going far distances. Mass transit rail would be more like the subway systems or like the MTA moving trains like from Westchester down here into Manhattan. Advantages, use less energy, produce less air pollution than cars do, use less land than roads and parking lots, and cause fewer injuries and deaths than cars. Disadvantages, they're expensive to build and maintain, cost effective only in densely populated areas, right? Only in compact cities do the mass transit rails really work. When you start to get that urban sprawl, not as cost effective. And once again, riders need to be committed to a transportation schedule. However, at the end of the day, again, the idea for an eco city is to not have car use. And again, just gave you 4 alternatives to cars. Definitely understand a few advantages and disadvantages of each of the 4 examples that I just showed you. All right, so obviously, land use planning going to be important, and maybe this is something that you're going to go into as a career, right? City planning, eco-city planning is going to be a kind of a budding field in environmental science. So through land use planning, governments can control the use of certain parcels of land by legal and economic methods. Zoning can be used to control the growth and to protect areas from certain types of development, but zoning has its drawbacks. Developers can influence or modify zoning decisions in ways that threaten or destroy wetlands, croplands, forested areas, and open space. Zoning also usually favors high-priced housing, factories, hotels, and other businesses over protecting environmentally sensitive areas and providing low-cost housing. So again, not always can zoning be good, but if you use it properly, obviously, you could provide proper land growth management. And what we want is smart growth. So as we go through now the rest of the 21st century, the idea is for our cities to have more of a smarter growth. What does that mean? Reduce your dependence on cars, control and direct that urban sprawl, protect your ecologically sensitive areas, and use zoning laws to channel growth just in those areas that you want. Use the zoning to protect other ecologically sensitive areas. So once again, smart growth tools. Here's a good chart. Limits and regulations on the left, protection on the right. So limit building permits, draw urban boundaries, create green belts around cities. We'll talk about that in a second. Promote mixed use of housing and small businesses. Concentrate development along mass transportation routes. Plan ecologically, use that land use planning to protect your ecology, your environment, right? The ecology out there. Plan against your environmental impacts, right? Plan so that those don't happen. Plan to again, integrated regional planning. So not only your compact city, but talk to the regional areas as well, other cities, to make sure you guys are all the cities are growing in a smart way. Protection, preserve open space, buy new open space, prohibit certain types of development. Tax land, not buildings. Tax land on value of actual use, right? Full cost value as on highest value of developed land. Tax breaks only for owners agreeing not to allow certain types of development. For cleaning up and developing abandoned urban sites, give tax breaks on that. And revitalization and new growth, revitalize existing towns and cities in this smart growth way. Build well-planned new towns and villages within cities, again, in this smart growth way. So what is the eco-city concept? The eco-city concept allows people to, number one, choose walking, biking, or mass transit for most of their transportation needs. Number two, all buildings, vehicles, and appliances meet high energy efficiency standards. Three, abandoned lots and industrial sites are cleaned up and used. Much of the food in an eco-city is grown locally, and eco-cities protect biodiversity by preserving the surrounding land. So transportation priorities, again, talked about this. Red is bad, single occupancy vehicles. Here's your carpooling. We thought was going to be the saving grace in the 80s. Really didn't work out as well. Here's your commercial vehicles. There's public transportation like buses and trains, bicycles, and then obviously if you can just walk to work and to school and to places where you need to shop and things like that, well, obviously that's the best case scenario for a more sustainable city. So Curitiba in Brazil is a leader in the eco-city concept. It is the ecological capital of Brazil. They have a superb bus rapid transit system. 72% of the city's commuters use the system. Cars are banned for 49 blocks in the center of the city. Only high-rise apartment buildings are allowed near major bus routes, with retail stores in each building, which reduces the need for residents to travel. The whole idea of an ecosystem is you have all your stores, your food, clothing, entertainment, things like that right on the ground, and then people live above that in high-rise buildings. So if you need to go food shopping, you just walk downstairs, grab all your food. You're going to go to have a drink with a friend or have some food with a friend. Again, when you're over 21 for that drink, of course. You walk downstairs and it's right there. You don't need to get into a car. You don't need to get into a train. You don't need to get into a bus. Everything is right there, right? High-rise apartment buildings right along the rail path so that people don't need to drive to the railway stations and then park their cars, right? No, you just walk to the train station, get in the train, head on off to work, right? This eco-city, Curitiba in Brazil, recycles roughly 70% of its paper and 60% of its metal, glass, and plastic. Again, real easy because everyone's living close by, so it's real quickly to collect all the recycled material and then reuse it. Care for the poor include free medical and dental care, child care, and job planning. That could be a little harder here in the United States, but obviously that helps as well, right? You get free medical and dental care in the city. That's fantastic. So here is the city, Curitiba in Brazil. Again, you'll notice it's kind of in spokes. So you have the city center here, and then you have these these rails and buses that come out, feeders, and you have these little city, kind of mini city centers outside of the main center, where again, all the shopping is done right here. All the shopping. You don't need to go anywhere else. Everything you need is right in your little neighborhood. So again, this is an eco-city concept, and these is a way to uh, build a sustainable city for the future that helps the environment. Again, talking about, just go back, I know I wanted to talk a little bit about those buffer zones. What they do is you're going to have a city in the middle, and then they'll have a row of parks around the city, and then more city, and then more rows of parks. So you kind of make these concentric circles going out and out and out from the city with people living, open space, people living, open space, et cetera, and that allows you to preserve biodiversity and again keep people kind of in one area where all they need is right there. All their food, their clothing, their shopping, their entertainment, their living, their transportation, all right where you live. So you do not need a car or anything like that, right? You can walk, you can bike, or you can take a train to pretty much anything you need for your life. So again, this is the idea of an eco city. We have some cities that are starting to do this. And obviously, as you become members of society, you go out there and get jobs. Maybe some of you will get into urban planning. And the idea is if you're going to plan new cities or revitalize old cities, do it in this eco city concept for sustainability. So key ideas as we round out this chapter. Again, rather long, 3 parts here to chapter 10, but we can sustain forests by emphasizing the economic value of their ecosystem services, right? That's that full cost pricing, halt government subsidies that hasten forest destruction, protect our old growth forest, harvest trees no faster than they are replenished, and plant trees to reestablish forests. We can sustain terrestrial biodiversity and ecosystem services by protecting severely threatened areas and ecosystem services and restoring damaged ecosystems. Most urban areas are unsustainable with their large and growing ecological footprints and high levels of poverty, but they can be made more sustainable and livable using that eco-city concept. All right, that was a lot, folks, but again, as always, hope you enjoyed. That concludes part 3 of my lecture on Chapter 10, Sustaining Terrestrial Biodiversity, Forests, Public Lands, Grasslands, Wetlands, and Cities. And as always, I thank you for listening.